Hi and welcome to our next YouTube video. In this video we're going to be plastering around this set of doors that we bought. We bought this off the internet and we did realise when we bought them as a second hand that they're about 10mm too big. So we had to chip the plaster off first and now we're going to make good this recess. And in this video we're going to show you how we do that. So the first thing we did was we dot and dabbed this plasterboard on. There's not actually much clearance between the old brickwork and these hinges. And we'll eventually replace these hinges, so hopefully the doors look like brand new. Dotting and dabbing, all it really do is to cut a piece of plasterboard the size that you actually want. And then with some board adhesive, you put a set of dabs down, put the plasterboard on, and get it nice, square and level. Hopefully now we're going to paint this, but plaster this side using a stop bead and a corner bead, which I'll show you now. Unfortunately, I have to forgive that's the kids running around the outside of the house. So these are the two sort of beads that we use. We use a stop bead and an angle bead. They're quite common in plastering. The angle bead we're going to put along the top because we're actually going to plaster underneath here. And the stop bead we're going to put down the side. You might get a little bit of cracking just underneath the stop bead, but we haven't really got the room to get in and plaster as we mentioned. Right, so this time we're going to be plastering and blending this into this wall. We're also going to plaster the underside of this. Normally we'd better plastering the whole wall, but that's probably a bit much as a DIYer. And if you're going to practice, you're better off practicing somewhere first where people can't see. Over the summer, we're going to be building a cabinet around this, knocking this part down, and doing a few videos on renovating this area, which is another reason why we're only going to plaster and blend this in. It's an ideal project for a DIYer. Okay, so the next job is to prepare the wall in terms of suction, and there are various products that we use for that. These products that we have are just the ones that we have on us now, and we're not endorsing them, we've not been sponsored. There's lots of good products around that all do the same job. If you're going onto plasterboard, you wouldn't really need to prepare it at all, unless it's older plasterboard. This matte emulsion needs a couple of coats of watered down PVA. If you water it down 5:1, a couple of coats, that's perfect to go onto. This surface here is slightly higher suction, so I'd probably give that a watered down coat of PVA first and then again another couple of coats. You'll tell by how quick the PVA draws into the wall. If it sits there and lingers for a while, it takes a while to dry, then you've really solved the problem of the suction. The other things you'll hear mentioned, these various grits. These are really good and they go onto a shiny background such as silk paint. If you use this, the one problem if you're blending in fact you've got to get over the grit. So obviously where you're at the edge of the blend you're going to get little ripples, so it's not really suitable for blending in. This one's quite a new product in terms of plastering, not really in terms of the product itself. It's a waterproofer and it works really well at controlling suction, high suction backgrounds like old plaster. A couple of coats of this and it'll cure the problem of high suction. The problems with this, you really need eye protection. Personally, I'd put long sleeves on. If I'm doing a ceiling, I'd have a hood on because I really don't like this on my skin and it really smells. So if you're using this, you need to have the windows and doors open, otherwise it gives me a headache. Other than that, really good product. So carrying on with the preparation of the wall, the one thing you're going to have to decide is how much you're actually going to plaster and where you're going to blend in. You notice you've got these little hairline cracks. They're not really a problem, it's just a bit of movement between the lintel and the brickwork. So we're going to put some scrim tape onto the cracks. That does mean that we're going to have to go past the scrim tape in order to plaster. So it's easier if you put the scrim tape right up to the ceiling and then plaster up to the ceiling and blend it out about here. Also have to take the brackets off. You can always guarantee you're going to end up plastering more than you probably think. So when you prepare the wall with the PVA or the SBR, go a bit further than you think you're going to need. Otherwise the plaster will dry out on you really fast if you go past that point you've worked PVAs. What you do with this is simply cover the crack over and then cut it off. And you might want to give it a couple of strips. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is measure and cut the beads. Really, it's just a case of measuring the total height that you need or the width, but it doesn't necessarily have to touch the floor. If it's 10mm above the floor, that's probably better, to be honest. We cut this out to 208. Right, so we've got measured 208, and the easiest thing to cut these with is a set of these. But if you haven't got these, you could use a hacksaw. Okay, so the next part is to fit the bead onto the wall. For that we're going to use staples. If you can't get staples in because there's some sort of metal screw tape underneath it, then you can use screws or even a bit of screw tape just to hold into place into your plaster. You need to get the top bit level. And then because we've dot and dabbed this on, it's actually vertical. But if it wasn't, you could alter the bead to make the wall vertical and then plaster it to the new bead position. As I mentioned, all we're going to do is put a little bit of filler in just behind this bead once we finish plastering, just to tidy that up. And then you also need to make sure this top bead and the edge bead are the same position there, otherwise you'll get a line across. Okay. But plastering is an incredibly messy job. The less you do, the more you need to protect things. We've put sheets down on the floor and we've protected over here in case there's any spills across. It also protects it from the PVA, the SBR or the blue grit. We're going to start applying the SBR in this case, so we use a roller to do that. And the one important thing when you are plastering is eye protection. It's so easy to get plaster in your eye and it happens in the blink of an eye, excuse the pun. But it's a hospital visit if you do, and it's really painful. I can talk from experience. Right, so you just roller the SBR or the PVA on, covering the wall with 2 good coats. As you notice, we've got all this safety gear on. Okay, so we've applied the SBR and that has now dried to the point where we can plaster onto it. If you've gone to it too quick, it can cause bubbles and things, especially the PVA. We're going to apply 2 coats of plaster, and the first coat, the way I look at it, is to fill everything out and do the work, so you end up with a reasonably smooth surface. The second coat is the one that looks good, but it does less work. So it's a 2-coat system. I've put the water in the bucket ready, so we're about to start mixing. I've put roughly a couple of inches of water in the bottom because we're only patching up here. And 1 bag will give you 10 square metres. We need 2 coats, so hopefully this will be about half a bag of plaster. Right, so we've got a mix inside today, even though it's a back area. We've got the doors open, but one thing you do need is a mask. I wear a mask even if you're mixing outside. It's pouring with rain, so it's not an option to mix outside today, unfortunately. We've got a mixer. Now, probably as a DIY, you might not have a decent mixer, but you can get attachments that go into drills, and they're not very expensive. And it's more than enough if you're just doing some patching work. We've wet the bucket so it doesn't stick to the sides of the bucket, and we've also wet the hawk. If you don't wet the hawk, the plaster will just stick to it. So now we're going to mix it up. We're looking for a creamy consistency. If it's too wet, it'll go absolutely everywhere. But if it's too thick, you're going to struggle and it'll be really hard work to get onto the wall. So you're looking for a nice creamy consistency. I can actually feel when it gets too thick because the mixer starts to tighten up. So add a little bit of water and that brings it back to life. Okay, so we're mixed up. Now put a scoop on. Right. Right, so the key with the first coat is just to get it onto the wall. Don't be too precious about it, you won't get it perfect. Once the first coat's on, then come back over and smooth it. If you do it too slow, then this will be dry and you'll be struggling to get on the wall. When you fill the beads out, fill across it rather than going straight across, because otherwise you'll end up with a ridge. It's not simple the first time you go across, but when you come back and give it a quick flatten, you need to go up the bead.
Myself, I like to pump myself up. Nowhere else to be, I'm burning hotter than the sun. I can't be held down, oh yeah, I'm higher than the clouds. When we're all together, we just let it all out. We just let it all out.
Okay, so one of the things is to keep your tools clean. So in between each passing, you're best cleaning everything. And it's a good time to clean out the bucket whilst you're waiting for things to dry. It can suddenly dry to a point that you need to get on the plaster.
Be outside. We just wanna be outside. We just wanna be outside. There's nothing more free than to be yourself. We living our dreams like there's nothing else. We just wanna be outside. We just wanna be outside.
One thing you need to look at is to make sure this top edge is already flat and straight. It can be tempting to overfill, underfill it. And remember, the second coat is just to make it a nice finish. So you need to do the work with the first coat, really. Okay, so the next part of the job, as this is starting to take up, which really means it's starting to dry a bit, is to remove any bits on the beads, any bits along the top that built up, and you just run the trowel along and clean them off. If you don't clean the big clumps off, they'll drag back through the plaster when you put the next coat on, and it will drive you mad.
Myself, I like to pump myself up. Nowhere else to be, I'm burning.
What you're really looking for is you don't want any big hollows in the plaster at this stage. And this time take up, we can get rid of the odd line here and there. We're about ready to second coat, so the odd line will get taken in with the second coat. So beads are clean, and then you can also run along the inside. You really don't want that ridging up. And again, just a quick run round. just to make sure it's reasonably smooth. That's about ready for the second coat. Okay, so it's time for the second mix. The second mix you're going to use less because you've already filled the beads out. As I said before, the second coat really is just to smooth off to the final finish and a nice smooth finish. I'm probably going to use about a quarter less. I have to be honest, we did actually run out on the first coat. It's actually quite difficult to judge when you're doing a small job. It's easier to judge when you're doing a big wall because you can just work out the meterage. So we've put about 1 3/4 inches, just under 2 inches, and hopefully that'll be enough. Then mix it up slightly wetter than the first coat so that it basically flows a bit smoother.
Myself, I like to pump myself up. Nowhere else to be, I'm burning harder than the sun. Can't be held down, oh yeah, I'm higher than the clouds. When we're all together, we just let it all out. We just let it all out. We just let I don't know about you, but I just feel like I gotta let it all out. We just
So put the first coat, second coat on all the way around. I'm just going to second coat this underneath. Don't need to try and get it smooth. You need to get it on the wall. Okay, so that's the first cut on, and then I'm just going to give it a little smooth and then wait. Time's crucial with plastering. If you got it too quick, it'll keep putting lines in, it'll get ripples. Too slow, and it will dry on you. You need to go on now when it's slightly started to take up again, and then smooth it out. So I'll go over it now, just give it a very, very light smooth. All we're really looking for is to see that the wall's flat and we don't get any sort of indentation shapes, because we can fill them out now. But you don't want to do too much with it. You could clean the beads up just to get rid of that excess Again, you don't want to run around too much and drag the dried out stuff through the brand new plaster. It's a very light trowel this time. And you can start to see that there's a very slight ridge there, so we'll just pull that out a little bit. You don't want to overdo it. If you overdo it, you'll put ridges in. You're just looking for a flat surface at the minute. And you can also tidy up around the bottom, make sure there's no big burrs. Depends what you're going to do. If you're going to put scone board on, then really, as long as it's tidy, that's what matters. If you're going to go right down to the floor, then obviously you need to make it really tidy. And again, let's just wait for it to take up a bit. Now, because we're plastering down to the floor here, being in a slightly outside building, you don't really want skirting board in here. You just need to make sure that we've got these indentations filled out now. You can just trowel across as well, just to get a nice smooth finish. Really, it's a waiting game. Okay, and before we get too far, you also want to make sure this top line is straight and flat. Obviously, when you look at the window from outside, you don't want to see a big bulge anywhere along there. So before it sets too much, you really want to make sure you've got a nice, flat, straight line.
We just wanna be outside. We just wanna be outside. There's nothing more free than to be yourself. We live in our dreams.
Probably best to stand back and look at it from a distance, especially it looks okay. Okay, so on to the second trowel now. This trowel is just a slightly smoothing trowel, and you want to be getting the bottom nice and flat as well. Nice light pressure, just filling out as you go. The other important thing now on this coat, the second coat, I want to start making sure that this line that we're blending in is smooth and flat. So as you run your trowel up, you might start to see little imperfections starting like there. If you do, you just fill them out a bit and then just drag the trowel up. And the next trowel will also sponge down this and then blend it in properly. And you want to avoid any little lines like that. So if you get anything, you just go back over it. Just go over the whole thing like that. You don't want to over trowel it. Probably 4 or 5 trowels will be enough. If you over trowel it, you'll start to get leopard print and all sorts appearing in the plaster because you've just simply dragged the plaster across the wall. Right, so this is a third flatten, and we're going to flatten it over again. And this time we're going to also try and clean the beads up. Just sometimes run your finger down them is enough. Make sure it's clean on the inside. Really is a case of just smoothing it over. What to avoid doing is starting halfway up the wall, because you'll put a ridge in where you start troweling. So if you start from the bottom or start from the edge or the top, work your way in, then avoid that edge.
It's feeling gritty, gritty.
Right, so we're just smoothing in this edge now, and we're just going to put swirls on with a sponge. The sponge needs to be wet. The other thing is to keep your trowel clean. You just work the edge in and then run over with the trowel. If there's anywhere that's not quite filled out, such as there, you can always just put a little bit more in at this stage and go back over it, and it will fill out to a nice smooth finish. You can also work into the plaster, just to stop any watermarks. This edge will start drying out quicker, so really you've got a fine opportunity to do it. If you go on it too late, you might need to sponge a bit more to get it back to life, and you can start getting a ridge forming down this edge, which obviously look quite unsightly. Okay, and the next part is also just to tidy up the top. You're better doing this slightly later and slightly earlier, because otherwise you'll just put a lot of dinks in the top. Ultimately, you need to go along and just very carefully get rid of the excess. You don't really want it to come down onto your plaster too much, and then just go along and smooth that edge up. When the plaster's dried a bit more, we'll sponge this nice and clean, so you've got a really clean, tidy edge. There's got a bit of a line here in this area here, because we've had to get on top of this, and now's the time to start smoothing that in. As the plaster starts to take up, it will actually get easier to smooth this in. And again, you need to just sponge this a little bit.
It's feeling gritty. Yeah. It's getting tricky. It's getting really tricky in here. Ow. We going through the summer. We going through the summer. She wanna turn up with me. We just wanna be outside. 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 Yeah. There's nothing more free than to be yourself. We living our dreams like there's nothing else.
Okay, so the last part of the job, I've mixed some filler up, and we're just going to fill this edge. And we're only going to fill about 1 inch really. You might need 2 fills, it's hard to say. We'll fill this, sand it back, and if it needs it might need a bit more filler, and that can just be painted. And again, it really is a case of just filling into the bead.
In the sun, get me up, down, yeah, I'm higher than the clouds. When we're all together, we just let it all out. We just let it all.
Okay, so we've done the big cleanup and we've finished the plastering, we've filled the sides. All I need now is a quick sand, maybe in 2 or 3 days. And then when this has gone light, we can paint it. If you need to, you could possibly have to put a bit of filler down the edge, but it shouldn't really. Apart from that, we're ready to paint.